Good afternoon. We are grateful for Mrs. Martins Monier's visit. She has come all the way from Curacao and via Dominica and St. Martin to conduct a needs assessment for us in terms of our records, archives, cultural heritage. We've been around the territory from Jost van Dyke to Tortola to Virgin Gorda, making assessments and taking interviews with various stakeholders in the cultural heritage sector and in the government. And so we've been quite busy for this past week. But Mrs. Monier's visit came as a result of the Caribbean branch of the International Council on Archives reaching out to us and asking, what help do you need? And this came after the storms last year in 2017. And so we're just very thankful that the group Carbica has sent Mrs. Martins Monier here to us, and she's been a great help. We were able to meet with many public officers, many of the curators from the various museums, teachers, librarians, records officers, and culminating her visit, we were able to have a workshop just a few minutes ago where we had about 35 participants altogether. So this room was packed to the gills, and I think this is an indication of the level of interest not only from the public sector, but also from the private sector, because we had a number of people inquiring from the private sector, can we come? And had we had more space, I think we may have been able to open it to them. But I think this is the beginning of good things, greater things to come, and we look forward to Mrs. Monier's report once it's concluded, and any further steps that we can engage with Carbica in to assist the records and archives and cultural heritage preservation sector in the territory.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rala. Ms. Monier?
Well, I'm very happy to have done this mission. I discovered a new island, a new country, and also I've increased my knowledge of damage made by hurricane and meeting the people, telling also their personal stories, what they've been through. And of course, as a paper conservator, I'm mostly concerned about paper documents, but it's not only that, it's much more. So I didn't sort of close my eyes to the rest. And I know that you've had a huge amount of destruction, and even with all the planning, you can never prepare for something like that. So it's gonna take quite a while to recover from that. But hopefully, I've been giving some tools, and hopefully also tools to prepare for whatever will come again. And I have to still digest a little bit what I've all seen. My report, I still have to write my report. So if you have specific questions, I'm quite happy to answer. But I know there are a lot of needs, from small to large, and well, one need is definitely that you need a national repository, be it a national archives and maybe a national library as well. And you need boxes and tarpaulin and, simple things also to cope with recovery. So this is basically so far as much as I can say, I think.
Thank you so much, Ms. Monier. And I'll open the floor to the members of the media to ask your questions.
Kathy Richards, JTV News. Ms. Monier, could you say, from what you have seen, the extent of damages, is it above or beyond what you anticipated on coming here?
It is above.
It's above?
Yes.
And to what magnitude?
Well, I have only a few references that I can compare to, and that's St. Martin and Dominica. And St. Martin, I've seen 2 months after the hurricane passed. So it was more the damage was more visible, but I should say that now we're almost 6 months further, and everywhere you look, there's a damaged building. There's the roads. There's cars damaged. There's the nature is still pretty much. I find struggling to get back. I've seen nature take over faster on other islands where there's more water. So to that extent, yes. Then again, I wasn't there exactly after the storm, so I wouldn't say you didn't do enough. That's not. But I can imagine that if you're that far, it's also because the extent was much larger.
Okay. What were some of the major concerns you had to face with from participants of the workshops that you had just moments ago?
What were the major what?
Concerns.
For me or for the
For
participants?
the participants.
Well, I don't know. You would have to ask them.
They had the chance to raise.
Well, they did, but they were a bit silent. I think they didn't dare. It was also a very large group, so it's more difficult to express yourself. But as soon as there was a pause, there was conversation going on. I think definitely information, the lack of information. What do I do? And the biggest concern I think they have is safety, health. That's for them an issue now, because they have to look and consult moldy documents. And also the situation where they store their records is not ideal. Roofs haven't been repaired. There's still, water dripping here and there. There are still issues when it comes to repositories or storage units. So that's also their concern. And I don't know if their concern is about an upcoming hurricane, although I do have the feeling that it actually should be their concern, and hopefully it will be after this workshop.
Okay, and quickly, how soon can we expect the report from you to be ready?
Well, I don't know if it will be released to the press. I mean, I've been asked to write it by Carbica. So I don't know to what extent they're going to publish it. But I have to write 2 reports because I've been to Dominica before. So I have hundreds of photos which I have to choose from, and I have to write something concise. So I think a couple of weeks, because I probably start, I don't know which one I will start with, maybe the Dominica one, because I might start forgetting. I don't know yet. Approximately a couple of weeks.
What are some of the things the territory needs to really bolster its record keeping, and to protect its records in the event of future storms like the 2 we experienced last year?
So we were talking in the workshop about preventive conservation, and that is, it basically goes back to the old adage, prevention is better than the cure, and it is better to prepare and prevent rather than repair and repent. Eh? So the matter of having a national repository or a national library that are built to withstand the effects of natural and man-made disasters are vitally important. And then within those structures, then utilizing various techniques to ensure that you create layers of protection for the materials that are housed there. And you see these sorts of techniques in larger countries where they have very valuable materials. But that's not to, in any way, discount the value of the material that we have here. Something that we've been discussing is that we may need to go about actually having very deliberate appraisals and valuations of our collections here, not just in their archival state, but also looking at the value of saving current material from destructive sort of elements, and analyzing their value to the various sectors within the territory, particularly financial services, tourism, and others. So it becomes important to prepare and prevent, so that there is not this sort of problem with dealing with remediation and recovery, especially when we have destructive elements that come along, like Irma, like Maria, that we really didn't understand at all, and we're really beginning to realize that this is the new nature of the destructive elements that we can expect in the future. So it's a learning experience for all of us, but we now know the standard that we have to expect.
Okay.
So I tried to do it on two levels. I showed basically what should you be reaching, moving towards. But I also gave very basic tips on how can you help yourself now, before you get any large amounts of money. You have to scale things. So I try to give tools for every level of a situation, so that they know what they should ask, for instance, and they know what they need right now, and what is it that they can get easily, and what is it that is more difficult to get, and where they have to raise their voice in order to get the help they need to prepare for the next one.
Okay, so you're saying that they don't necessarily have to wait for whatever money is coming to develop.
Well, there's certain things for instance, a disaster plan is written. You have to think about things, and then you have to act in a certain order, so that you can prepare at your level in your office. But then the chain of command has also to be, it has to be a well-routined procedure. There has to be a protocol, and then I was comparing. I was saying it should be a pit stop in Formula One, that everybody knows exactly what they have to do, and so they act much faster than if you bring your car to a garage and you have to wait 3 weeks because they first have to find what the problem is, and then they have to. No, there is a structure, an organization that makes it hyper efficient, and definitely if you have to act in times of crisis, that's not the moment where you have to invent the wheel. You have to have it all ready on paper. You have to have these guidelines that help you focus and do the right thing at the right moment.
May I, if I may pick up on that just a little bit. Some years ago, it was either during a Records and Information Management Month or a Records May Day, but we shared with the public information on what's called information governance, which speaks to those structures that are needed within an organization to ensure that every person is a part of the process for not only disaster recovery, but also for disaster preparedness as it pertains to records, information, data, all these things that are really the lifeblood of any organization.
Yes, Mr. Warlock. So I believe I would consider your department to be very important, as you describe it as, when it comes on to records and archives, and it's the lifeblood of any organization, and your department would play a very important role in that. What exactly did we lose archives-wise?
Well, I'll start by explaining that in terms of archives, Our program is designed such that we want to have officers who are dealing with current records, understand that we have to look at our archival material from the time that a record is created, right? For instance, you have certain laws that are created in the territory. At the time that they are tabled and passed in the House and assented to by the governor, at that point, they become archival. Why? Because at that point, they are then public documents that are accessible to the public, or should be accessible to the public. And these are slated for permanent preservation. There are other types of records that are created that don't have that type of enduring value. So we want to ensure that this system that is set up, everyone who's creating records understands that in order for the records that they create, they need to get to the point of archival if that's what they're scheduled for. And so we want to ensure that everyone knows what happens. In terms of what was lost, you may know that many departments suffered significant loss. And as a result of what I just explained, there are many records that should become archives that won't become archives because they were damaged significantly by the natural forces. In terms of the archives material that we have, or that we have responsibility for in my department, we lost a few materials from our main office where we had current archives stored. I would say roughly about 3 to 5% of those materials. In terms of the older archives that date back to the mid-1700s, we didn't lose any because the archive strong room is relatively safe. However, that does not in any way discount that we do have some structural issues with that building. And we need to ensure that those records are kept safe, because that is really the nucleus of archival material that we have here, the oldest, most ancient records that we have here in the territory. And those need to be preserved by any means necessary.
Well, the report is yet to come out, and I imagine your department and government at large would be responding to it or reacting to it in some way. Mrs. Martins-Monnier did suggest a library, or what do you make of that, and making that become a reality? And while you're at it, you said the building is structurally compromised, the one you have now.
Yes.
Is there any considerations perhaps to even get a new building that could perhaps house a library and even that structure you have now?
Mm-hmm. Going back quite some years, there have been discussions about creating a national library. However, it is, you would know that a national library is somewhat different from a national archives. A national library, you loan material. Of course, you may have special collections and reference material that you don't allow out of the facility. But within archives, you don't loan information at all. It stays there, and it goes through the process of being accessioned and treated so that it can withstand anything further. In a library, a lot of the material is a little more transient. It's not, and this is not everything, because in a national library or in a library generally, you have books that you may hold on to for a very long period of time, and then you have some books that you won't hold on to for a very long period of time. In the National Archives, once it gets to that point, everything stays, right, as much as possible. As far as having a repository and having a national library, it is absolutely essential that we have these two types of of institutions. The reason being that our cultural heritage is very important, and the stage that we are now in our development, it's time. We've had many reports written for National Archives, the National Archives Repository. So, it's not a new proposition whatsoever. But it's the will, the funding, and just getting it done.
If I may interfere, archives are growing too. So right now, what in both cases, in libraries and in archives, what I've noticed so far is that you have 2 to 3 different storage units, because the space originally given to the different caretakers was not big enough. So then suddenly we need to find a new location, and then of course also when there's a storm you need to relocate. But there is a dire straits or dire need of space just to store. And then if you're gonna arrange the space, because it's not possible otherwise, then might as well make sure that what you're going to organize or maybe build, which would be ideal, does have all the requirements needed in order to preserve your records, your heritage.
This question is directed to, I would love 2 individual answers here. In your profession, do you believe generally, how important do persons see this sort of thing, records keeping and paper conservation and that sort of thing?
Yeah.
And as for localizing it back to the BVI, do you think it's something that has been lobbied for before, and something we want to see happen, a national repository, a library? Do you think it has been seen as important, both publicly, and more so in among legislators who and government who has the power to make it happen?
All right. Well, I have been working for, in the past, for private people, collectors, and for institutions, for museums, and for archives. When you have a private person come to you, they're of course concerned about their collection, and they want you to help them. But it is true that a lot of people don't have any idea how much I can do. Or sometimes they imagine I can, I just do like this and it's brand new. So a lot of communication has to be done on what is actually a conservator. It's true, and it is a profession that is getting more and more public. You see a lot in Europe, some museums where they display people actually restoring paintings, restoring huge drawings, and the public of the museum can see them at work, and and there's more and more article and media coverage on the subject. So people are starting to understand what we are doing. And a museum, of course, is a big display. It's a showcase. So if something ends in the museum, people right away recognize the value of it. But when it comes to archives and records, I think there's a big not understanding of what it means. If you ask anybody in the street what is an archive and what's in there, most of the people don't know. And don't know the value, the cultural value of what's in there, unless they have to do research or they want to build up their family tree or Then they start digging into there and they realize, oh, that's the information you find in an archive. They don't realize that. And also, they don't realize that history is made every day and that it belongs to an archive. So even a book that is now being published on testimonies of people who went through the hurricane on the island, a book just came out. That is history. That is a document you want to keep because it tells the story of your island. And there won't be that many of these documents published. So you want to hold on to that. So that's my experience. And I've been showing a little film of what I was doing at the National Archives. Just, sort of, we wanted to put something on Facebook. We just want to communicate more to the people what we're actually doing in this building or this bunker that is built around the corner.
Sorry if I may just finish answering the question. In terms of the local perspective on importance, this afternoon we are marking or memorializing former Deputy Governor Mr. Elton Georges. And he was, I would say, the key person in ensuring that the archives unit in the Deputy Governor's office was established. This came after an unfortunate incident that took place around about 2000, where some deeds, wills, and other materials from I believe it was the 18th century, were discarded without there being a proper chain of command. And after a bit of an inquiry, it was determined that something needed to be done, and the unit was established. Over the years, we have had support, varying levels of support for equipment, supplies, and for also obtaining consultative reports that would help us define the roadmap for how the archives should develop. We've not always been able to act on all of the recommendations, but the plans are still in place. I think one of the obstacles or the challenges that we have is that very often the wheels of government turn rather slowly sometimes. And I think that's what has happened in this regard. However, coming out of Irma Maria, the former Deputy Governor, Rosalie Adams, indicated that, and she said to me that she wanted to have a scanning project commenced, where government records would be scanned as much as possible to ensure that we could begin that process of having them stored on servers as opposed to stored on paper in case there was another storm that came by and bereft us of more material than we've already lost. So there is support, there is an interest. We have a Friends of the Archives group that has started, and we also have, where the Premier has, I believe, indicated in the budget speech that the archives and records management legislation is going to be commenced. So we have varying levels of support and more support building and growing. And with the interest that continues to come in from the public and from the press and from the private sector, we look forward to more support coming. But we're in recovery now, and so we're trying to get back up to full standard.
Hi, I'm Claire Shevchik. I'm from BBI Beacon. As you mentioned, hurricane season is quickly approaching, but also, as you mentioned, the wheels of government turn slowly. If you had to name one thing that absolutely needs to be done before hurricane season comes in order to prevent damage or mitigate further damage, what would it be? And will that happen, and can it happen?
Well, I don't know. I don't know if it will happen. But I think what I did today is one of the things that will help, because it gives them the tools, gives people the tools who are have these collections under their responsibility to prepare. Now they do need to get some material, so the money they're going to ask for, it's not going to be a large amount of money, but that money they will need to prepare better. But they basically have the tools to do their best. Of course, I mean, having a safe built inside an office that's maybe slightly exaggerated, and also considering the space where they're at. Everybody's been relocated, split from their records, so that makes it difficult to prepare. But and there are certain things that I would hope would happen. For instance, in your archives, that the roof is being looked at. For me, it's really a priority. Then what happens inside that you can handle, but you cannot repair your roof on your own, and that's for me the priority, because it's already been fragilized by the hurricane, and it will get even more fragile. So there's a big risk. Yeah, what will happen, I don't know.
Do I need to answer that question?
If you choose, yeah.
If I choose, okay. Yeah, I think the matter of people availing themselves of information and techniques to take steps to avoid damage before, and you know, we've seen where people have done this prior to the storms. You know, traveling across the territory, we've seen a range of different situations, from, you know, very bad mold-ridden areas to spaces where things were covered down in plastic, and even though the roof went, the materials inside were still able to be saved. So, you know, it's important that people get more and more information and avail themselves of techniques that they can use to help protect what they have. And, you know, you'd be surprised. You know, you may think, well, what can a piece of plastic do against 200 and something mile per hour winds? In our building, where our main office was, part of the roof was torn off, and of course the wind came in and did quite a bit of damage. On the area where we were, the galvanized was removed. And so we had, you know, tons of water just coming in, but because everything was covered down in plastic, we were able to save so much of the material because it was just covered. And so, you know, these are some of the things that we have to think about. And as Mrs. Martins-Monnier said, you know, those types of tools are readily available. You know, it doesn't take a whole lot of money to obtain some plastic sheeting and a piece of rope to tie it in, or some tape to you know, tie around it, or what have you. And, you know, the preparation of disaster management kits, we've sent out this type of information in the public before. It just means taking action, the necessary action to educate oneself and to put those bits of information into action.
Where was your unit housed?
We were right across here in the Burham building upstairs.
There?
In the Burham building upstairs, adjacent to the civil registry.
Okay.
Or I should say the former civil registry. They're now in another location.
Thank you so much, Mr. Verlac and Mrs. Martins-Monnier, for facilitating the members of the media today and for expounding so beautifully about what has happened so far, the territory with your visit, and what can be done to help mitigate against future disasters and how persons can better prepare for them. Members of the media, thank you so much for attending, for asking the questions and shedding some light. Thank you all, and do have a good time.